My name is Doreen D, and I'm a very grateful member of the Worldwide Fellowship of Al-Anon. I needed that. I hesitate to tell you that I have only been in the program a little over 10 years. After Carson and I got here Thursday, you know, he said, let's keep our mouth shut. Everybody else has been in here over 25 years or more, you know. So I feel like the babe in Al-Anon years. Not in age, naturally, but in Al-Anon years I do. Before I go any further, I want to thank every trustee and the whole committee and every one of you here for making Carlton and I feel so welcome, wanted, and loved. You really have gone out of your way to make us feel welcome, and we appreciate it. I'm a little nervous, and I'll be okay in a minute, but I think some of you can identify with that. I could identify with John last night when he said he gave his first talk, and all he could do was, You know, I have a horror of getting up here and saying, my name is, you know, not remembering. So I'll be all right in a minute or two. But thank you so much for making us so welcome. This is a very prestigious retreat. I've heard a lot about Blackstone for a good many years, so I felt very honored and very privileged when you invited us to be a part of it. And as it usually happens in our programs, we usually get to come to these things when we need it. And we were driving up we living just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, in Concord, and driving up Thursday, we both said that our cups were getting empty and we both needed to have them filled. And this weekend is doing it for us. And so again, thank you. And Rose and I had a lovely surprise this morning. We were presented with an orchid, and I think that was kind of nice. I appreciate that very much. I will try to tell you a little bit about me, about how I reacted to the disease of alcoholism and what it's like now. First of all, I'd like to say that anything I say today is strictly my own personal opinion. I strongly believe that the family member needs a program of recovery as much as the alcoholic does. I need my program more today than I ever have before, because like most of you, I have living problems, and my program helps me with living problems. We came into our programs together, so maybe it's been a little easier for me in some ways, I'm not sure. I would also like to say that I hope I don't come across in any way as if I'm taking my husband's inventory. I'm not in Al-Anon to do that. I work on myself in Al-Anon. But it's a little hard not to bring him into the story, because without the disease of alcoholism, I wouldn't be here. So I have to talk about him a little bit. And we do have a much better relationship now than we ever had before, and he doesn't seem to mind about those things. I'd like to thank him today, too, because he's very supportive of me. And he always comes along and he supports me. And he gives me more help than maybe he realizes. And this weekend is a special weekend for us. We'll be married 34 years tomorrow. So that's kind of nice. And I can't think of a nicer place to spend an anniversary than here. And after all the turmoil we went through for so many years, it's nice to say that not only is he my husband now, he's also my best friend, and I love him very much. Thank you, Carlton. I'll start off and tell you a little bit about me. Yes, I do talk funny. I know some of you are right there right now, figuring out where does she come from. I've been accused of coming from Canada, Charleston, West Virginia. I'm from England. I was born and raised in London. I'm an only child. I was born and raised as a Roman Catholic. Rose and I talked Thursday night, and we had so many things in common, it was unbelievable. I changed my religion during the drinking years because I thought that would get him sober. So and I'm now a Presbyterian. And I don't know whether that worked either. It didn't at the time, anyway. I was about 6 years old when World War II started, and I thought that, and things I tell you now, I don't tell you for pity or anything like that, just to relate a little bit about me and what I was like, and about a lot of my insecurities. I was 6 when World War II started. I thought that everybody slept in air raid shelters at night. You know, I thought that that's what you all did. We used to time it. Hitler used to bomb every night starting at 6 o'clock. And so by 5:30, you had your little duds together, and you went to the air raid shelters, and you got in there for the night, you know. We had bunks, wooden bunks. I slept on the top for a few nights, and I'd fallen out quite a few times, and my father decided to put me on the bottom. Carlton says that's what's wrong with me now, that I fell out too many times. I had very strict parents, very good parents, but they were very strict. I'll tell you a little more about my mother later on. She was a loving person, and she cared for me, but she was a very negative person. And it took me being in this program before I could see her, that she did the best she could with what she had at that particular time. We never had a whole lot of food, but we were healthy, and somehow or other we managed to get through. We all have, in my generation, apparently had real good teeth. We didn't have any junk food at all, none whatsoever. We weren't able ever to get it. I remember now, looking back, that my mother said she had stood in line one time for, I think it was 4 hours, for an orange for me. I'd never seen an orange when I was little. And one time, I think we had enough food for a week in the country, and that was all. But we were a lot more fortunate than those that were in Europe. We were at least free. I remember we listened to the radios in the air raid shelters at night, and when Goebbels or Goring would come on with all their propaganda, we would always sing a lot of the songs that he played this morning. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Carlton and I mentioned they were good beer-drinking songs this morning. We thoroughly enjoyed listening to them. Somehow or other we managed to get an education. I don't know how, really, because we were very short of teachers. 1 week we would go to school in the morning and 1 week in the afternoon. I spent most of my time underneath a chair or underneath a table because of the bombing, but somehow or other we did manage to get through school. I went to a Roman Catholic school, I went to a convent school, I finished high school, and I went to work in an advertising agency for Lever Brothers, the soap people in London, and I felt very insecure. I come from a working class family. The house we lived in England is what you refer to over here as a shotgun house. You know, you could look through the front door right through to the back, and the next house was jammed right up next to it, so you never could look out either side. So I did come from a kind of a poor area, neighborhood. And I went to school, and I won a scholarship to go to a school that was a little more prestigious. And some of my insecurities started there. The one nice thing about going to a convent school like that is you all wore uniforms, so I didn't have to worry about if I looked as good as the next person. And that helped a lot. As I said, I got through school, and my first job was to work in an advertising agency, and I worked in the... I thought he had something wrong with the mic. And I worked in the advertising agency, and that I enjoyed a lot. And I started to go out and date some. I was kind of shy. I didn't relate real well to boys at all. I was the type who, tagged along with her girlfriend all the time. Whenever we went anywhere, she always got the good-looking one. And I always got the one that was left. Now, Carlton would like for me to tell you there are exceptions to that rule. And he's one of them. I went to a friend's wedding. She was marrying a GI, and I went to the wedding, and that's where I met Carlton. And I was impressed with him because he was dressed real well that day, and he was a lot of fun. I realized afterwards none of his clothes belonged to him. He had everybody else's clothes on, but that's okay too. Now, to date an American in London was not really the nicest thing to do at that time. I'm sure the British troops had the same impression made of them wherever they went, but the Americans didn't have that good a reputation. My father had heard 3 things about Americans. They were over there, they were overpaid, and they were oversexed. So consequently, he did not want his daughter marrying an overpaid, oversexed American, or even dating one, But anyway, I liked Carlton, and we started dating, and he took me to a squadron party the very first night. And I'd never been to a squadron party. And our food was still rationed. And it blew my mind to see all the fried chicken, the chocolate cake, and a pimento cheese sandwich on top, the whole works. I could relate to all of that. And I thought, this is wonderful. I'm in hog heaven, We started dating pretty regularly, and he played baseball for an English team over there to better Anglo-American relationships, I gather. And I went along to all the games with him, and I enjoyed them, and we partied, and I partied right along with him. And we had a lot of fun. My mother and father were not too happy with this relationship, as I told you how they felt earlier, but I started to invite him home. And looking back, I admire him from coming now, because when he got to where he would not wear his uniform. He would come in civvies, because the area I lived in, there were some rough fellas hanging around on street corners. And when he would come down to my street, you could pick out an American very easily by their clothes, even if they weren't in uniform. And he used to get a lot of rude remarks, said to him, and he'd make a dash and come in the house and visit. But he was always nice to my mother and father. and he would always bring us a lot of goodies to eat and to have, and we appreciated that. The first time he came to a meal, I'd like to share this with you. My mother, we were still rationed, and she put all our rations together and bought him a steak. I think Dad and I had some bologna and something else, but she had this feeling that this boy was far away from home and needed a good meal. I found out later he was getting steaks all the time, you know. She didn't know that. Anyway, we started dating, and we seemed to have a lot of fun together. Now, about this time, Carlton went come back to the States. He is from a small place in South Carolina called Donalds, and no one's probably ever heard of it. It's a population of 450, and it's near 17 miles north of Greenwood, and it's near due west where Erskine College is, in case someone knows where that is. But anyway, he came over here to visit an old girlfriend, and I gather he had a few words with her mother, so he came back over home and to England, and I suppose he thought, you know, if I hook up with Doreen, I won't have any in-law problems, because they'll all be over here, you know. So he asked me, would I like to come back to the States with him, and I said, well, I'll have to talk to my dad. Now, for those of you who are younger than my age, 50, I'm 55, if you're younger than that, you will realize, you know, that you did things in those days. You ask your mom and dad what you were supposed to do. And Dad says, well, is he thinking of marrying you? And I said, well, I don't know. He said, well, there's no point talking about it. So the next date we had, and we done all our dating. Carlton would travel from one end of London and I would the other, and we went to the movies a lot. And we were in the movies, and we called it the pictures in England. And I told him what my dad had said. And about that time, the girl was coming down the aisle selling ice cream and orange juice and stuff like that. And I said, well, you know, what Dad had said. And he said, well, will you or won't you, and do you want a chocolate or a vanilla? And I thought of it, and I said, I like chocolate, and yes, I will. Now, some of you may not know Carlton, but after 34 years of marriage, that's the most romantic he has ever been. And that's okay, too. We have a relationship where we do pick at one another a lot, and it's kind of nice now. Years ago, we couldn't, not during the drinking. So we finally made plans to get married. The wedding day dawned, and knowing what I know now, I should have known what happened the night before. He went on a bachelor's party with all his friends. So we didn't own a car, and my father had hired a limousine, and the guy was kind of an Andy Cap type, you know, the chauffeur. So we're sitting in the living room, and Carlton's late getting there, and this guy looks at me and he said, you know, love, I had one of these the other day, and that yank never showed up for that girl. Which, you know, didn't go over too well. But anyway, finally Carlton showed up, and I'm hiding in the kitchen, and I could see that he was not feeling too good. Let's just say he had a slight headache. And my father knew what would settle that. He did not realize what the drinking was like, and he gave him 2 or 3 stiff drinks. Boy, that was it. He floated through the whole service, the reception, everything. He doesn't remember any of it. And he said later on, he'd heard that if you couldn't remember something like that, it wasn't valid. So maybe, you know, he could have got out of this marriage. That's what he kept thinking. I'll have to backtrack a little bit right quick and tell you another thing, that when we met the first night, he made a date for the next day, and he showed up, and he couldn't remember what I looked like. So he showed up in his uniform, and I obviously was the girl, and that's when we started dating. When you hear his story, he is still not 100% sure that I'm the one he was with the night before, but I'm just the one he picked up that day, you know. Anyway, we finally got married, and we lived over in England for about 9 months, and then we moved over here. And Carlton was getting out of service, and we moved in with his mom and dad. Now, I would like to tell you that his mom and dad are the nicest people. His father's dead now, and I still miss Papa a lot. His mother and father could not have been nicer or kinder or more thoughtful to me. And he has a brother and sister, and they have been very, very good to me, too. And I do love them. I had a lot of resentments for a lot of years against them, but due to this program, I've been able to work that out, too. Because, you see, there never was any drinking around Mom and Dad. Never. And in my sick thinking, the disease that already started affecting me is, obviously, you love your Mom and Dad better than you love me. And some of you Al-Anons can relate to that, because there never was any drinking around them. We stayed with them for a few months, and then we got out on our own. And now I'm not going to go into a whole drunk-a-log or all the moves we made. I would just like to share with you a little bit about what this disease had done to me. We had 2 little girls, and they are both in their 30s now, and we moved around quite a bit. Carlton was in construction work at first, and every time we moved away, the drinking started picking up, and when we moved closer back to his mother and father, the drinking would stop. And I began to realize that this drinking was not quite normal. I knew other people didn't quite live like we did, and I didn't know that it was affecting me like it was. I remember some of the fears I showed, with some of the feelings I will go with you. I always thought I was unique, that no one had the problem in their household that we had. You see, I was married to a man who was very nice. My husband has always been a very kind, thoughtful person. He's never physically, mentally, verbally, or abused me in any way. He just wanted to be left alone. I was the witch in the family. My children knew something was wrong with their dad, but they didn't know what was wrong with Mum, because the way she reacted to everything that was going on. And they've had a hard time adjusting to that, and even to this day I think we've made our amends, but I still feel sometimes they're closer to their dad than they are to me. They've got some things they remember about some of the things I did. I never enjoyed good times, and we had a lot of good times in this marriage because Carlton was a periodic drinker, and there'd be periods of times when he'd go for months without ever drinking, and yet I never could enjoy it. I would wake up in the morning and a little bell would go off in my mind back here, and I think, well, is today going to be the day that he's going to drink? And can I do anything to stop it? And you think about it constantly. I'm sure there were periods of time when he didn't even think of drinking, but I did. It was always in the back of my mind. And I can share this with a group of you. You understand what I'm talking about. If you shared it with some other group in a church, they wouldn't. But if I started to enjoy things, I would think to myself, don't do that, Doreen, because God's going to punish you for having fun and going to make Carlton sick. Now, if that isn't sick thinking, just think about that a little while. That's what the reaction was for me and how I was beginning to feel. I had been brought up to believe that nice girls don't marry drunks. And I say that lovingly. And I had married one. So what was wrong with me? And that other old thing, little saying we've heard so many times, behind every good man there's a good woman. Mine wasn't doing too good. So what was wrong with me? Again, I felt like I was responsible. I don't think you alcoholics realize what a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week job it is to keep one step ahead of you. If he would tell me he was going to do something or go on a business trip, my mind would jump into action. Okay, now what are we going to do to stop this? What are we going to do to prevent him from getting a drink? I found out after we'd been in the program that I always poured it out. If I found it, I poured it out. Afterwards, I found out that Carlton always bought 2 bottles. One for me to find and pour out, the other one for him to drink. And, you know, as tight as I am, I realize now how much money I've wasted, you know. I used to think it was in the taste. I can remember one night he was in his cups and had passed out, and I'm in the kitchen. I thought, Darren, I'm going to find out what this stuff does. You know, it must taste real good. So I fixed me a drink, and it was always vodka of his choice. God, it tasted terrible. And I thought, well, what does he drink this stuff for? I tried that and couldn't understand why he kind of liked it. If I wore a certain dress and he got drunk that day, I didn't wear the dress again. Now that, I know, it's kind of hard to believe. I remember cooking spaghetti. I cooked it 3 weeks or 3 times in a row, you know, not 3 days in a row, but, you know, spread out. And every time we had spaghetti for supper, he came home drunk. We didn't have spaghetti for years, you know. I have a good friend in this program, and I heard her say this one time, that every time she changed the beds, her husband got drunk. They had the dirtiest bed in town. It was like, you know, I'd say to myself every time, this time I'm going to do different. This time when he walks in the door, I am not going to say a word. My girls used to say to me, Mama, if you would just keep your mouth shut, half these fights wouldn't start. But it was like that there was a string attached to the doorknob and to my mouth, and as soon as he walked in, it was, whoom, you know. I let him have it every time. I really, looking back now, I don't see how the man lived with me. I really don't see how he lived with me. I really don't, because he was so nice all the time. He just wanted to be left alone. I asked him very early on not to drink in front of our children, and he said he wouldn't. And in his thinking, he didn't. Now, he came in drunk a lot of nights, but we never saw him drink. You know, we didn't see him actually do it. He was inside already, so we never did see him do it. Every house, we've moved quite a few times. We've moved 17 years, I think, in our marriage. This last time we've been there 13 years, and I hope we stay where we are now. But every time we moved, the first place I looked for was the room where I got the best view of the driveway. And I was talking to Rose about this on Thursday. Hers was the kitchen window. I didn't care what room it was, just as long as I got the best view of the driveway, because that's where I was going to park myself and stay, so that I could see when he came home. And it was like, if he was 5 minutes late, it was like a gut-level feeling. I knew that he was drinking. You know, we have antennas. Us Al-Anons, have you seen them? They're way out here. And, you know, you can be not have drunk for 6 months, and you may be 100 miles away, but, boy, they start twitching, and you know when they're going to take a drink. It's a gut-level feeling right here, and you get a lump here, and you can't get rid of it. I heard an Al-Anon say one time, she said, I've lost so many meals due to you, and she was talking to her spouse. He said, well, I never stopped you. She said, no, but that knot that you caused there every time did. You just can't get past it. So every house we moved in, I found the best room I was going to get to. My girls would say, Mama, can we do so-and-so? And I'd say, no. You have to wait and see how Dad is before you bring any friends home. You never bring anyone home. And we can't go anywhere or do anything until we see how Dad is first. Everything revolved around Carlton. Now, he never once asked for that. Not once did he ask us to do that. This was ours. This was me. It wasn't even my girls. It was my fault. That's how the disease has started to affect me. So anyone who thinks that, you know, the alcoholism isn't a family illness, just look at your spouses or your loved ones or your other family members and just see the way they've reacted. I think sometimes we were more crazy than the alcoholic ever was. We really are. We have been affected by it so badly. I wish we had treatment centers for Al-Anons. I've heard that there is one opening somewhere. I would love to go to one time. I think I would enjoy it. I was the abusive one in the family. Carlton never was. In our household, we were all female. The cats, the dogs, everybody except Carlton. And we asked him very early in life, well, the girls asked him before than I did, Dad, when you use the bathroom at night, please put the lid back down again. Because when we get up to go into the bathroom at night and you don't turn the light on, and you know, you girls, you sit down and you fall in, and you know, that wakes you up in a hurry with that cold water. So Carlton come home one night and he was in his cups and he was sitting down, and if you know him, he's tall. He's about 6 foot, and I'm kind of short. And he was on my level, and the poor fellow he decided he'd sit down for everything. So he was sitting down, and he had his pants around his ankles. And I think the word I can sum up for us family members is frustration. You know, we know that this person is nice, kind, and loving, and we can't understand why you do this to yourself. So I went in, as usual, to lay the law down, and he just sat there and didn't say a word. And I got more frustrated, so I knocked him off the commode, and he hit his head on the tub, and he got back on, and pow, I knocked him off again. He said that after he got in the program, he told this at a meeting, and this guy said, well, Carlton, why didn't you lock the door when she started doing that? He said, well, it was just like drinking. I thought next time it'll be different, you know. Asked 2 dumb questions. He would come in and he'd been drinking, and I always say, now the man can hardly walk. And I go up to him and I say, have you been drinking? And Carlton said he used to think to himself, boy, is she dumb, you know. The other one was, well, what caused it this time? Because I figured out if I knew what caused it, I could straighten it out. There must be a reason. And I used to think maybe it's because I didn't keep myself looking nice enough. I didn't keep the home looking nice enough, all these things. And I was very strict with the children. I couldn't control Carlton, but God, I could control them. And I really miss now that I lost a lot of the good days when they were little. I really missed a lot. Anytime we have a newcomer coming into my home group, and they got small children, the first thing I said was, enjoy your children. Enjoy them now. Even if you're living in a difficult situation at home, enjoy your children, because you never get those days back again. And I never will. And I miss those things that I should have done with my children. Carlton was the one who was the fun person to be with. He was the one who took them out when he could. but I was the one who was the witch the whole time. We're going to have our first grandbaby in July, and I think God's going to pay me back for that, because I'm going to enjoy it and I'm going to spoil it and do all the things that I haven't been able to do before. So anytime I do talk to a newcomer, I always just enjoy life more and don't get so wrapped up on somebody else's disease like I did. I planned funerals, and I didn't share this for a long time because I was too embarrassed, but I could accept the fact of Carlton being dead and me being a widow than I could being married to an alcoholic. You know, you can go out into your backyard and talk to your neighbor and say, oh, my husband's got diabetes or what, but you don't say, oh, my husband's an alcoholic. There was still a stigma to it, and I'm so glad to hear that that stigma is not there now. And so I was ashamed and embarrassed, and I thought, well, you know, maybe I could accept being a widow better. And this would be maybe on a Thursday night, and he hadn't come home, and I'd lay in bed, and it takes about 2 hours to plan a good funeral. I'd think, well, who are we going to have as the pallbearers, and, you know, the hymns and the minister and all this. And the only thing that bothered me was how I was going to tell his mother what had happened, he said, because she did not know anything about this drinking. And when I first came over here, one of the ministers in town thought, you know, I was a little strange. I gather that, I was a foreigner and I was a Roman Catholic. And Martin and I were talking about this the other day. Some lady stopped me when I first came over here into England, to the States from England, and she said, what's your religion? And I said, I'm a Roman Catholic. And she said, yes, I know that, but are you a Christian? And someone else had said to me, you know, you speak remarkably good English for being here just a few months, you know. And I took that with a grain of salt, too. I was the only person who ever had a hot dog with a knife and fork. I'd never eaten a hot dog before, you know, so I've made a lot of boo-boos in my life about things like that. But I could accept being a widow, I thought, and I'd lay in bed planning the funeral, and I always had a black dress. I always kept a black dress in the closet because I was going to look good, and everybody was going to feel sorry for me. Some of you have heard Nell Largent talk, and I can relate to what she says, that, you know, she looked pitiful, and I was going to look pitiful that day. But then the next thought that would come in, please God, bring him home safely. Don't let that happen to him. Because you see, I loved him. I loved him very much. I never know where to put this when I share with people, but I feel it's very important to say it now. To me, alcoholics are very loving, sensitive, tender, caring people. You really are. 99% of you are. And you have given me so much support and so much love. And I never thought I would say this, but today I am grateful I am married to an alcoholic, because you brought me to another program and a new way of living, and I am grateful for that. So I hope, and anything I say today doesn't offend any of you, I hope you take it in the way it's given, and that is with love. So I don't want to offend anybody's feelings. You know, when he would come in, I was always the kiss and smell type. You know, he would walk in and I'd go up to kiss, you know, and you don't always, he says vodka didn't smell. So I go back for the second sniff, but it does, believe you me, it does smell. Especially at night when you're sweating it out, you know, that's when I would move to the other room. The drinking had progressed and we had moved quite a bit. We finally moved up to Massachusetts and the drinking got worse there. And we lived in a very nice town. We lived in Somerset, just outside of Fall River. And I really should have enjoyed it more than I did. We have been invited back up there again to visit some friends several times, and there's still part of me that doesn't want to go back. I think I just hate to live some of those memories that we had up there. And that job of Carlton started playing out, and we came down to Concord. Our daughter by this time was in college, our oldest girl, and she didn't want to have anything more to do with her dad, she said. I think a lot of it was to do with me. But she stayed up there and she finished college. Our youngest daughter moved down here with us, and we moved to Concord about 12, 13 years ago, I think it is now. And Carlton went to work at a textile, and that's his business. Went into work in a textile factory. And I went to work at the local mental health center as a secretary. Now, my higher power, who I choose to call God, and I have a pretty good relationship with him now, it's like a friend, he has a fantastic sense of humor. He'd have to put me in the addiction section. And I'm typing up case histories, and I'm looking, I thought, I've got one of these at home, you know. And I became an instant authority on alcoholism. Now, I had talked Carlton into going to see a psychiatrist when we were in Massachusetts, and I'm not knocking psychiatrists in any way. But Carlton came home that night and he said, you know, that guy said there's nothing wrong with me, but you may have a problem with my drinking. So I thought about that and I thought, you know, that man is far more educated than I am. Maybe I do have a problem. Why can't I understand this drinking? Now, since we've got real honest in this program, and I've heard Carlton tell his story, he told the psychiatrist that he may drink a fifth in the course of a year. No wonder the guy thought I had the problem, you know. So when I went to work at the mental health, I thought, well, it won't be any good in coming out here, but I'll get the literature, and I will take it home. So I'd wait until everyone left at lunchtime, and I would get all the literature for the alcoholic. I always put aside the family member, because after all, that didn't refer to me, you know. He was my problem. And I brought the literature home, and I left it around. I don't know whether he read it. He did tell me one time he wondered why I was leaving it, because my father didn't have a problem with drinking, and he didn't know anyone who did in our family. He didn't know why this stuff was suddenly appearing. But I finally got to the point where I think I can relate to this, sick and tired. Tired of being sick and tired. I knew there must be a better way of living. I'd not heard of Al-Anon. I don't know why I'd not heard of it, but a little bit like John said last night, I'd not really heard too much about AA or Al-Anon, and I couldn't relate to it. But I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I got to the point where I hated going home. Have you ever, some of you family members, ever wanted to just get in the car and drive on and on and on? That was me. I always fantasized myself going to the beach and not being responsible for anyone ever again, just to be by myself. But I don't know what it was. The last episode came, and Carlton was going to be gone to Atlanta for a day, and he was gone for a week, and we picked him up at the airport. No, we didn't. Yes, we did. We brought him home from the airport. That was another time when I got him off the plane and pinched the tar out of his arm and found out when I got home that he had fallen asleep in New York on a mattress and burnt his arm very, very badly, and I didn't realize how cruel I had been to him that particular time. But this time he came home, and I kept him, to notice what I said, I kept him sober for a weekend, or so I thought, and I wasn't very nice either. We had ordered a new dining room suit, and it came in a carton, and we had to put it together, and I made him do that. And it was just about a couple of years ago, we were trying to put the extra leaves in, and Carlton said, this thing never has worked right. Now, I know the program tells me I shouldn't bring the past back, but I couldn't help it. I said, that's when you put it together last time you were drunk, remember? But anyway, he had not got over his period, as he said, and he started back drinking on Monday, and I didn't know where he was. By this time, he had started going to hotels and checking in under all sorts of names, and I don't blame him. Who would want to live with me? But finally, I did track him down. I was good at doing that, and I talked to the girl on the desk, and she said, you better come and get him because he's very sick and very ill, and we're fixing to call the police or an ambulance. So my son-in-law and I did go out there, and we did bring him back home to the house. And I went to work next day, and I decided that I needed to do something. Something's going to have to be done. I'd driven to work so many mornings with sunglasses on and gone into work, and people would say, what's wrong with your eyes? I have more sinus problems and eye irritations than anyone else because I didn't want them to see how I cried all the way to work. And I finally decided that I would go and talk to one of the men I worked for, who was the minister and was an alcoholism counselor. And he couldn't believe it. He just couldn't believe it when I told him. And he said, will you come out here for counseling? And I said, no, I don't think that's going to work. And he said, well, let me get you in touch with someone in AA. And he did. Well, this was on Wednesday. And I came home that night, and as John talked about, I related about the family member. My two girls came home, and I did. My oldest girl had moved back to Concord with her husband by that time, and we had a family conference. And you know how you back them in a corner and you get in a ring, you know, and you start saying, you've got to do something about your drinking? And I've been told in this program that when you point a finger at someone, you've got three pointing back at you. So I try to remember that now. When I don't point a finger, because you don't know what's pointing back at you. And we told him something had to be done. And he agreed. And I understand now that he would have done anything at those particular times to get us off his back. This person from AA came out on Saturday. And the man is dead now, and I wish I could have shown my appreciation more to him than I did at the time. And he came out, and I was going to be real big and leave them alone together in the kitchen. Well, I was in the next room listening to every word that was said. I wanted to get out there so bad and say, yes, but, you know, he does this or he does that, you know, but I never could get out there. So he and his wife took us to our first meeting on a Saturday night, and we went to Charlotte to the old Hawthorne group. And I can remember the speaker we heard. And I remember Carlton picked up a white chip, and I was very proud and very happy. But, you know, I couldn't relate to any of you. And we started going to meetings 6 nights and 7 nights a week, and I went with him purely to make sure he got there. I did not go for any nice reasons. I made sure that he got there. He went to get me off his back. I am eternally grateful to you alcoholics for not letting us into your closed meetings, because I felt I couldn't sit in the car. You know, I was going to do, he wouldn't let me in, and I had to sit in the car to make sure that he got there and got back. And someone talked to me and said, why don't you try Al-Anon? And I thought, well, I look stupid sitting in the car for an hour every night, and then, you know, I got to go somewhere. So I went to my first Al-Anon meeting, and I sat down, and I thought, but they don't know what my problem's in the other room. When he gets sober, everything's going to be all right. Everything will be over, you know. That we'll go just for a few weeks, and he'll get sober, and we'll be just like normal people again, you know. And I could not relate to anybody. But finally, I kept going, and someone got hold of me, and she told me, she said, you better do something about yourself, and you better start working a program, because your husband's growing. And he was. I could see the difference in him, and I was still full of resentments, and I still had a lot of hatred inside of me for what had happened, not for him, but of some of the things that had happened in our home. And so I don't know what, I don't take directions very well, but this time I did. I started listening, and I started paying attention, and I started attending meetings regularly. And I suppose it was like a small miracle in my life. It started sinking in. And I'd like to share with you what the program of Al-Anon has done for me. The first thing it gave me was freedom. I am not responsible for anybody else but me. And that was such a weight off my shoulders. It's like an AA I heard once who said that every morning he felt like he had to crank the sun up, and every night crank it down. And that was me. I felt I was responsible for everything, and that I had to be the person in the family who made all the decisions. I didn't give Carlton a chance to grow at first, because I was the one always speaking for him. I was always afraid that people wouldn't like him, so I would speak up for him. We were at an open meeting once, and an AA lady, and I'm grateful that she did this now, she came up to me one day and she says, does Carlton ever talk? I said, yes. Why? She said, every time we ask him a question, your mouth opens and he says something. And she was right. Yes, I did. And I thought, I'm going to have to quit this, and I'm going to have to start working on myself. And they told me the 3 C's in my program. I can't cure, I can't control, and I didn't cause the alcoholism. And any newcomer that I meet, I try to stress the 3 C's to them, those things we can remember right off the bat. And that was a great relief to me, to know I didn't cause it, because for years I thought if I was a better wife and all these other things, he would have to have drunk. And so this was a good relief to me. I had started gaining self-confidence. I had never had any self-confidence at all. As I said earlier, my mother was a very negative type person, and I love her. But I can remember when I was young wanting to become a nurse, wanting to do a lot of things, and she always used to say, you're from the working class, Doreen. You have to stay in the working class. You don't get out of the working class. And they were Irish Catholic too. And I started the insecurities, and the lack of self-confidence started coming out then, and I kind of blamed her, I suppose. But after I've been in this program, I realized that she did the best she could with what she had at the time, and it was not her fault. And I cannot dwell on the way she brought me up. I have to do the best I can with what I've got now. So my self-confidence started growing. For the first time in years, I wasn't my daughter's mother or Carlton's wife. I was Doreen. I was me. And I started getting involved in things in Al-Anon that I was responsible for. It wasn't for what Carlton was doing. And this helped a great deal. And I got friends. We hadn't had friends in years. If we were ever invited to go anywhere or do anything at a weekend from the neighbors, I'd find out if there was going to be drinking. If there was going to be drinking, I'd tell them, no, we're not coming. Never told Carlton that we had an invitation. You know, our social life went downhill, and a lot of it was due to me, not due to him. I'm not lonely anymore like I used to be. married or living in an alcoholic situation, and when I say married, I have to remember there's a lot of us here who have mothers and fathers and children, is one of the loneliest feelings in the world. You don't share with anybody. You bottle everything up inside. I had shared with somebody years and years ago, maybe 20 years ago, that we had a problem in our home, and this neighbor seemed like she understood, and 3 weeks later it was all over town. So the walls went up, and I wasn't going to talk, and I wasn't going to share with anybody ever again. But now I don't have to be lonely. I can be alone and enjoy it, but I don't have to be lonely. And I have got friends everywhere, and some of my best friends are in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they have helped me with my program as much as some of the Al-Anons have too. And I have got friends everywhere all over the state now and over different parts of the country, and I never had any of that before. I'm more comfortable with myself. I never was comfortable with myself. What I'm doing now, if you would have told me 10 years ago, I never would have believed it. No way would I have done anything like this. And I'm not real comfortable doing this. I've been real nervous today, very nervous. I couldn't eat breakfast this morning because I was so nervous about it. But I was told early on in this program, when you're asked to do something, if you can do it, you should. It's for your own recovery. So if it doesn't help anybody else here today, it has helped me to remember what it used to be like. I don't want to get complacent in my program. I still go to a lot of meetings a week, and so does Carlton. And it's easy to become complacent. It's easy to stay home and say, I want to watch the movie, I want to go to a ball game or something. I have to remember all the time where I've come from. And I have to not take this program for granted. My God, I've always had a relationship with God, but I expect in the last few years it's much better. Sometimes I get angry with him, and I couldn't tell that to a church group, I'm sure, but there are times when I have got angry with God, but that's okay too. I know he understands. There's sometimes when I try to pray and meditate in the morning, I don't get through. Have any of you ever prayed or meditated in the morning, and sometimes you feel plugged in? You know, you can feel the juices coming, and you know you feel good inside. And other times you pray, and it seems like nothing's happening. And on days like that, I usually say, okay, God, it's not you, it's me. Hang loose with me today. I'll be back with you tomorrow, but just look after me today. So some days I have tried and just haven't been able to get it going, you know. But I continue to do what I've been told in this program, and that is to read my literature, keep in touch with my friends in Al-Anon, go to meetings, and to give my devotion every morning. A lot of mornings I don't feel like it, but I do it anyway. It's a form of practice, and eventually it comes round again. I have spells when we're down in the valley, but you know, I've learned that when you're in the valley, like a pendulum, when you go down, it's always got to come back up again. Things have not been that easy for Carlton and I in the last couple of years due to some of his business, which has a lot of problems to it. And we've gone through a form of grief period since last November when he sold part of his business out, and he's getting into something else now. And we were angry about why has this happened to us. You know, that we've been in the program and we're doing all we think we should, and it's not going right like it should. And I was a little angry with God. But we kept on doing what we were told to do. We kept going to meetings, we kept praying, and we started praying together, and we had never done that before. We both felt a little embarrassed about it at first, but we hung in there and we've kept doing it. And I think he feels the same way, I don't know, but I know in the last 3 or 4 weeks I feel better. I can see the light in the tunnel. I'm beginning to get the attitude of gratitude back again. So this weekend is really like the cream on top of the cake, and it's helped me to appreciate more than ever what we have got. Regarding my mother, she's in a retirement home in England now. When my father died 5 or 6 years ago, I thought, you know, I should bring her over here to live with me. And I get up in the morning, I thought, today's going to be the day I'm going to call her and tell her, Mom, come and live with me. And I'd pick up the phone, and I couldn't do it, as I knew it wouldn't work. And if it hadn't have been for my friends in Al-Anon and the program, I would have been a basket case. Because people, earth people, were saying to me, you know, you're an only child. There's nothing to keep her over there. Bring her over here to live with you. And my Al-Anon friends kept saying, do what you're comfortable with. And I knew that I couldn't do it. She made a decision to go into a retirement home of her own. I go over to see her about every 2 years. I have a cousin who's very, very close to me. She's like my sister, because I don't have any other brothers or sisters, and she keeps an eye on her. A few years ago, I went home and I decided I was going to try and make amends to my mother how I felt, and to try and really get a close relationship that I saw other daughters and mothers had. I tried and it didn't work. She got upset and angry, and I stormed out of the room. It was not working. But I went home last year, And that was the best visit I had. I turned it over. I said, God, help me to do right this time. Help me to build a better relationship with her. She's still the same, and maybe I've changed some. But we were able to talk. We were able to share. And we were able to tell one another we love one another. And I came home that time for the first time not feeling eaten up with guilt and remorse about how I was treating her. She's been taken very good care of. And I have the program to thank for that. If it hadn't been for Al-Anon, I couldn't have done that. My relationship with my daughters is much better. I'm real close to the youngest one, and that's the one who's having the baby. The oldest one is married and has a 15-year-old stepson who we're very fond of, and I'm very fond of her too. Carlton and I have been able to talk about this. If anyone in the family is going to have a problem, I think it's going to be her. We can see a lot of the characteristics. We have talked about it. She doesn't want to get into any program of recovery. She says it didn't affect her, and maybe she's right, I don't know. But Rose shared with me something this weekend which has helped a lot. She said if she is going to get into trouble, she knows that there is a program because she's seen you and Carlton. And I have to turn it over. I can't keep worrying and stewing about it like I would have done before. I can just turn her over to God, take care of her, and she knows where she can come if there is a problem. I still think that they have some feelings towards me. Carlton says he thinks I've made my amends. I've tried to do the best I can. And I think he's pointed out to them that I did the best I could under the circumstances. But I don't worry about that anymore. I have tried to do what I thought was right. I've got involved in service work, and that has been a joy. It made me feel independent, and it's really given me so much self-confidence. I was very privileged to be nominated as the delegate for North Carolina for 3 years, and my 3 years are over now, and I'll never will forget it. When I went to New York for the first time and they called the roll, and I stood up and said, my name is Doreen, and I represent North Carolina. I'll never forget it, because this is a person who had no self-confidence, had never done anything in her life, never done anything what I thought was worthwhile. And there I was. You had chosen me, a foreigner, to represent you in Al-Anon in New York. And that was wonderful. I got so much out of that. Service work keeps me going. It fulfills me. And there's 2 or 3 people here tonight who are on the committee with me. And it's great to see them here today. When I saw them when I walked in, I felt I'm home. The Area World Service Committee is like my home group. We get together 3 or 4 times a year, and it's wonderful to be there together with them. So that was fantastic. It keeps my excitement high. Service work does keep my excitement, and I finally feel that I'm a part of something, and I finally feel worthwhile. Alcoholism can take away all your feeling of self-worth, and I finally feel like, hey, I'm doing okay. There are days when I'm not doing okay, and there are days when I got to go back to step 1, and there are a lot of days I don't like me. I don't like the way I feel inside. I don't like the way I'm thinking, but I have a program, and I start working it again. I do it out of habit, and it comes back again. Someone said this program is not an event, it's a process, and I will be working this program to the end of my days. I wouldn't want it any other way. I've had people say, why do you still go to meetings? Carlton's sober now. I say, because we want to. Our whole social life revolves around our 2 programs. And last but not least, I would like to say that Carlton and I have the relationship now that I'd always wanted. It's not perfect. We have differences of opinion, and I'm sure I irritate the dickens out of him at times, as like he does me. But we have a closeness and a friendship now, and after 34 years, I think one of the nicest things I can say about him is that he's my best friend. And that I'd like to thank each and every one of you, because though I don't know all of you, it's through you, your dedication to your individual programs, that has brought me a new way of life. I am very supportive of my program, and I hope all of you are too. I heard Lois Wilson say when I was in New York, and I think it applies to any program, the dedication of each AA or Al-Anon member depends on the growth of this program. And if we're not dedicated to this program, and if we don't give it all, and if we don't reach out for the suffering family member, the program is not going to grow. And it's given me so much. I don't want to be lacking. I want to keep my insurance premiums paid up, so if I ever have to draw on it, it's paid up. And I want this program to continue to grow, and I want it to be there for the family member. Again, thank every one of you for asking me to be a part of this very prestigious retreat. You have given us so much, and we'll go home with our cups full. Thank you.